Have you ever met someone and felt a strange sense of familiarity almost immediately? Not just attraction, not just curiosity. Something deeper, something quieter. A feeling that this person somehow fits into your life in a way you cannot logically explain. Almost as if the connection was already there before the two of you even spoke. And yet at the same time, something feels unfinished. The timing feels slightly off. The circumstances are complicated. Or one of you seems emotionally unavailable, distant, or conflicted. This creates a confusing emotional paradox. Because part of you feels certain that this person could be the right one, but another part of the situation seems to stand directly in the way of that possibility. So the question becomes unavoidable. What if the connection is real, but the relationship still cannot happen yet? What if two people truly are compatible, emotionally aligned, and capable of building something meaningful together, but a certain psychological shift has to occur first? Here is where it gets interesting. Because in many relationships that eventually become powerful, stable, and deeply connected, there is almost always a period where something inside one or both people must change before the connection can fully unfold. And understanding that psychological process can completely transform how you interpret what is happening between you and another person. Before we go any further, something important needs to be clear. This conversation is not about encouraging manipulation, emotional pressure, or interfering with anyone's commitments. It is not about trying to force someone into a relationship or creating artificial emotional dependency. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, personal responsibility, and emotional maturity. The purpose of understanding psychology is awareness. When you understand why certain dynamics appear between two people, you gain clarity, and clarity allows you to respond with integrity rather than confusion. Sometimes two people are truly compatible, but emotional readiness has not yet aligned. Sometimes attraction exists, but unresolved experiences from the past still influence present behavior. Sometimes the connection is there, but one person must first confront something within themselves before they are capable of fully showing up in the relationship. This is not manipulation. This is human psychology. Now let's talk about the deeper emotional mechanisms that shape these situations. Human connection rarely develops in a perfectly linear way. People carry emotional histories into every relationship they enter. Past relationships, disappointments, fears, insecurities, and attachment patterns all influence how someone responds when a meaningful connection begins to form. Attachment theory explains this particularly well. Some individuals develop what psychologists call a secure attachment style. These people feel comfortable with closeness and emotional vulnerability. When they meet someone compatible, they move naturally toward connection. But many people develop anxious or avoidant attachment patterns based on earlier experiences. An anxiously attached person may crave deep emotional connection, but fear abandonment, causing them to move too quickly or become overly focused on reassurance. An avoidant person often desires connection as well, but intimacy triggers subconscious fear. As emotional closeness increases, they may withdraw, become distant, or create emotional space to protect themselves. Here is where the dynamic becomes fascinating. Sometimes, two people who are genuinely compatible meet before both individuals have fully resolved their emotional patterns. The connection is real, the chemistry is genuine, but one person still carries internal resistance that prevents the relationship from stabilizing. This is the moment many people misinterpret. They assume the connection must not be real, but that assumption is often incorrect. Pay attention to this. When two people are truly incompatible, the interaction tends to feel forced, shallow, or inconsistent in a very different way. But when two people are compatible yet emotionally misaligned in timing, the interaction often contains moments of intense closeness, followed by unexpected distance. This push and pull is one of the most recognizable signals. Have you ever noticed how some people behave completely differently depending on the emotional environment? When they are alone with you, the connection feels natural, warm, even intimate. Conversation flows easily. Eye contact lingers longer than usual. Their voice softens slightly, Their body language becomes more open and relaxed. But when other people enter the space, something shifts. They become more reserved, more controlled, almost as if they are consciously managing how the interaction appears from the outside. This is subtle, but powerful. Public behavior often reflects social awareness, expectations, and emotional caution. Private behavior reveals the authentic connection that exists beneath those filters. When someone feels a genuine emotional bond, but also experiences internal conflict about it, their behavior frequently changes, depending on the social context. The eye contact alone can reveal extraordinary information. In casual interactions, most people maintain brief eye contact and then naturally look away. But when emotional curiosity or attraction exists, the rhythm changes. Eye contact becomes slightly longer. When the gaze breaks, it sometimes returns quickly. There may be moments where the person looks at you when they believe you are not paying attention. These micro-behaviors occur because the subconscious mind is evaluating emotional safety and connection simultaneously. But this is where most people get it wrong. They interpret these signals as guarantees. Signals are not promises, emotional movement. And emotional movement does not always mean someone is ready to act on what they feel. This leads directly into one of the most misunderstood dynamics in human relationships: internal conflict. Imagine someone who begins to feel a powerful emotional connection with another person, but at the same time carries unresolved fears about commitment, vulnerability, or past heartbreak. Part of them wants the connection. Another part of them wants protection. This creates a psychological push-pull pattern. One day they seem open, present, engaged in conversation, even subtly affectionate. The next day they become distant, distracted, or emotionally unavailable. To an outside observer, this behavior appears confusing or inconsistent. But internally, the person may simply be navigating two competing emotional forces: desire and caution, connection and self-protection. Interesting again. When the connection between two people is shallow, distance usually ends the interaction completely. But when the connection is meaningful, distance often does something unexpected. It increases emotional awareness. When two people share a genuine psychological compatibility, separation can make the mind revisit previous interactions again and again. Small moments become more significant in memory. The tone of a conversation, a particular look, a shared laugh. These memories gain emotional weight because the brain recognizes potential meaning in the connection. But timing still matters. A person who is not emotionally ready will often oscillate between moving closer and stepping away. This does not necessarily mean the connection is imaginary. It means the internal process has not yet resolved. Situational contrast reveals even more. Observe how someone communicates through messages compared to in-person interaction. Text communication often allows people to express themselves more openly because the emotional pressure of immediate response disappears. Someone who seems slightly guarded in person may become more expressive through messages. They may write longer responses, ask thoughtful questions, engage late into the night in conversation that gradually becomes more personal. But when you meet face to face again, their composure returns. Their voice becomes measured, their body language slightly more restrained. This contrast often signals that emotional openness exists, but comfort with vulnerability is still developing. Group settings provide another revealing moment. When several people are present, individuals who share a quiet connection frequently display subtle awareness of each other. They notice each other's reactions first. A joke lands, and their eyes instinctively check whether the other person laughed. When something interesting happens, their attention briefly shifts toward that person before anyone else. These small synchronizations occur because the brain unconsciously tracks individuals who hold emotional relevance. But again, internal conflict may still prevent open expression. And sometimes, the most telling moment occurs when someone unexpectedly withdraws. You may have experienced this before. Everything feels comfortable for a while. Conversations deepen. Emotional familiarity grows. And then, suddenly the person becomes distant. Messages become shorter. Plans become less frequent. The emotional energy changes. This is often the moment when deeper feelings begin triggering subconscious defense mechanisms. The closer the connection feels, the more vulnerable someone becomes, and vulnerability can be intimidating for people who have previously experienced emotional disappointment. So they step back, not necessarily because the connection is wrong, but because their internal system is trying to evaluate whether it is safe. This is why patience and emotional maturity matter so much in these situations. Because forcing clarity too early often damages the very connection that needs time to stabilize. But this brings us to one of the most important principles in healthy relationships: integrity. Even when two people feel a powerful emotional connection, respect for boundaries must always remain the priority. If someone is already committed elsewhere, the responsible approach is distance. If someone clearly communicates that they are not ready for a relationship, that boundary deserves respect. Psychological insight should never be used to pressure someone into emotional decisions. True compatibility includes respect for timing, responsibility, and personal growth. Sometimes the most mature response is allowing space for life circumstances to evolve naturally. And here is a truth that many people only understand later in life. When two individuals are genuinely aligned in values, emotional intelligence, and life direction, time often clarifies the connection rather than destroying it. People grow. Situations change. Emotional readiness develops. But this only happens when both individuals maintain self-respect and integrity. A relationship that begins through pressure or emotional manipulation is never truly solid, rarely becomes stable in the long term. But a connection that develops through mutual understanding, patience, and maturity often becomes remarkably resilient. So if you ever find yourself wondering whether you and another person might truly be compatible, pay attention to the deeper psychological patterns rather than surface-level signals. Observe how conversations evolve over time. Notice whether emotional understanding gradually increases. Recognize the difference between temporary attraction and consistent emotional resonance. Compatibility is rarely loud or dramatic. It is often quiet, steady, and deeply natural. And sometimes the most meaningful relationships do not begin the moment two people meet. They begin when both individuals become ready for the same emotional reality at the same time. Until then, the connection may exist as a possibility rather than a relationship. And that possibility often teaches both people something valuable about themselves. Because the real purpose of human connection is not simply to find someone who fits into our life. It is to become the kind of person capable of building a meaningful life with someone else. So the next time you experience a connection that feels unusually familiar, take a moment to observe rather than immediately react. Ask yourself what emotional patterns might be unfolding. Consider what growth might still be happening on both sides. And remember that sometimes two people truly are meant to meet, not because the relationship must happen immediately, but because the connection reveals something important about who they are becoming. If this perspective resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own experiences with connection, timing, and emotional readiness. Human relationships are complex, fascinating, and deeply psychological. And the more awareness you develop, the more clearly you begin to see the patterns that shape them. If you enjoy exploring the psychology behind attraction, emotional behavior, and human connection, make sure you stay connected to this channel. Like the video, subscribe, and continue learning how subtle psychological dynamics influence the relationships that shape our lives.